Hey everyone, welcome to today's presentation, Secrets of a Test Taker, Passing Your VMCE Exam for the First Time. My name is Rasmus Haslen. I'm a Principal Technologist on the Veeam Certification Services team. Maybe you've already seen other videos on my channel. I try to produce some content on Veeam and VMware, but today, while the content in the title here does say pass your VMC exam the first time, I would argue that the strategies and suggestions I'll give you today could often be applied to any kind of vendor exam. Now, on the agenda today, we have quite a few items here. First of all, of course, very important, where do we start? How could we fill up some gaps? Then I'll try taking you through a sample on the exam guide. Typically, vendors have a sort of exam blueprint, you could say. Then we'll go through some tips and tricks for multiple choice questions. Then we'll talk a little bit about when you finally do go to take the exam, if it should be online in a online proctoring situation, or if you should go to the in-person test center. So lots of great content lined up. And then, of course, as always, I love some good Q&A. So we'll go through some questions at the end as well. The first part, where do we start off? So if you want to go and take the exam, you essentially have a few options. First of all, you have to either already be certified. So you're already an existing Veeam Certified Engineer on, for example, version 2020, and you're looking to upgrade to 2021. What if you're not certified? Well, then you would have to go and attend an official 3-day configuration management class. If you go to veeam.com/VMCE, you can find a list of education centers who has fantastic certified trainers who give you a wonderful experience. Once you've gone through the training, the education center reports your attendance to Veeam, then you'll be able to go and schedule the exam. Now, during the class, you of course have some hands-on labs. The education center should give you at least 10 days of extra lab time. I really suggest that you take full advantage of that. But sometimes, maybe if you're watching this video right now, you've already been on a training, your lab time's already expired. Maybe you're starting to finally get the time to go and do the exam. So maybe we need to do a little refresher here. And I've added some QR codes throughout so that you have a chance to kind of use your phone and just scan them for easy access. Here I've included a little link to a site called Veeam University. Some of you may be familiar with this already, but it's a great resource because it has free on-demand training. It's not a replacement for the configuration and management training, but it's a great source to be able to go and recap on the content that you've already perhaps gone through, fill up on some gaps here and there. Notice here, it's both for backup and replication and for Veeam 1. Now, as you start thinking about moving towards the exam, very common problem I hear from the students who are preparing is, I don't know what I don't know. And that's a fair statement. How could you solve a problem like that? I thought a lot about that, and I decided to try and write down or explain the system that I typically use myself. I like to call it the traffic light system. So the traffic light system is based on the vendor's exam blueprint or exam guide. So in the example of Veeam, there's a whole document. It explains what are you going to be tested on the exam, different knowledge domains, different learning objectives that are being tested. The QR code should hopefully take you right to the Veeam exam blueprint. Now, once you have this document, I want you to try and think of each of these items. Self-evaluate. Where am I? Do I know really how does this one line item work? If you're thinking, I don't know how this works, I couldn't explain to someone else, and let alone could I go and do it in a live environment, that means it's a red. If you're thinking, I think I know how this works, but I'm not confident that I could go and perform these actions in a live environment without some help or guide perhaps. Then we'll mark it yellow. And lastly, of course, if you're thinking, hey, I know how this works, I'm confident with this, I've used this before, I could do it, then we'll mark it green. And it's very visual. Here's just a little example I've just gone through. You can do this digitally. That's what I've done here, just to make an easier screenshot. But personally, I'm a little bit old school, so I print things and then I have my 3 highlighters and I'm sitting there highlighting away. The thing is, this is just a self-evaluation. So how do you know if you actually know or not? That's a fair question, but make sure you do this as the first starting point. Once you're done with that, you're happy with what you've put in, then we go and take the official Veeam practice exam. Okay, it's 50 questions. To pass the real exam, you need 70%. At this point, just take the practice exam once. Some people are tempted to sort of jump into brute force mode. They're starting to use their favorite search engine to go and look up different questions to try and find the answers as they're taking it. Don't do that. Just take it cold so you have an idea where are you right now. In this case here, you can see we have this secondary backup section. It's set to 0%. Then you go back to your traffic light report. If you see that I was actually set right at something like, let's say, yellow or green, but on the real exam you are hitting 0%, or should I say the real practice exam here, then maybe we have a disconnect. Now you know that you thought you knew this, but in reality you didn't. Now notice this can go both ways. Sometimes you thought you were red, but actually you were scoring higher. It just gives us a good starting point where we can be honest with ourselves and then start the journey towards getting certified. So how do I fill up those gaps? How do I make sure that I know what I need to know so I can confidently go and pass the exam? Of course, you already know. It's all about studying. But sometimes we need some advice, some nudging. What resources can I use? Well, use the exam guide as an example. Here I just took one sample section from the exam, and then we start attacking it one by one. Now, there's a lot of different items to go through. Sometimes we learn by just clicking on these links, reading about it. Sometimes you learn really well from watching videos where someone's explaining something. Sometimes you want to see presentations that are live so you can ask questions. But let's take some examples. What you want to do, of course, is get everything away from red, and the next step would then be yellow. What I like to recommend here is, it depends a little bit on your journey, what makes the most sense for you. If you've been using the product for a long time, well, some of these can be quite relevant then, because the product changes over time. What was the limitation might suddenly no longer be a limitation. It's just getting kind of a feature overview on the latest product version, or should I say the product version that you're going to be tested on, can be quite helpful. Sometimes the people writing exam questions want to write questions about new features. You know what those features are, it gives you a better chance to go and spend more time studying them. That could be just from the feature overview, but similarly from this What's New PDF that you can always find from at least Veeam, but also most other vendors. At the same time, there's this PDF called Release Notes. This sounds like something that's incredibly dry to read. What I found is many people seem to miss small, subtle changes, something that they know the product can't do. And then they use this information when they're answering exam questions. But over time, a lot of limitations are removed. So by reading these release notes, suddenly you can find those pieces of information listed out where it suddenly says, oh, now we support this. This way you don't get caught out. On the previous page here, you see links. These are kind of targeted links that are going to the Veeam user guide. I would suggest that you don't only read through those. It's a massive document. I think it's something like 2,000 pages. So it's not exactly a page turner going from one end to the other end, but it's a good place to go and read and also kind of make sure you understand. Maybe you're someone who's using Hyper-V every day in your daily work as a consultant, as a customer, or vice versa, maybe on vSphere. Just don't forget, the exam will do testing both on Hyper-V and on vSphere. And of course you can say, well, I only use one. Well, you don't have to be an expert on the opposing hypervisor. But the exam is, after all, if you know how to use the Veeam product. And that's what will be tested. So don't forget to also spend some time here on some of the other hypervisors. On Veeam.com, there's a whole section of how-to videos. Those are also really good for having someone walk you through certain features that probably were covered in the training. Maybe they weren't covered as in depth as you'd like, or maybe it's just a really good idea to get a refresher. Don't forget to miss those. On the Veeam YouTube channel, there's actually even more. Some of my favorites, for example, are the ones that are walking through the Veeam Explorer for SharePoint, the Veeam Explorer for Oracle, and I also really like the one for the Veeam Agent for Mac, just because it's one of those where maybe not everyone has a Mac, so actually being able to see that getting deployed, walked through, can be incredibly helpful. What if you want to go from yellow to green? Because red to yellow is mostly about understanding how something works, trying to explain it. I like to suggest the so-called rubber duck theory, where you have a little rubber duck, like what you might be using for your bath in front of you, and you try to explain something to the rubber duck. And if you can't do that, ignore the embarrassment if someone walks in, just try and do it. And if you find yourself unable to do that, maybe it's because you don't understand well enough. That was at least the theory from Einstein. And if we continue moving forward, now you reach the point where everything's yellow, or at least one item is yellow, and you are looking to push it forward to green. What can we then do? Well, this is all about being able to do something. So what if you have a large lab already, maybe a home lab? Wonderful, wonderful. And you might think, I need so many resources. Well, the official Veeam lab that you used in the training runs on something like 40 gigabytes of memory. So while that may be a little bit too much for your laptop, it's not completely impossible to buy some older hardware and run Veeam on top with some nested virtualization. You don't have to have licenses, right? You can always use the trial version of ESXi. There's a free version of Hyper-V that you can use. Maybe you'll have to go a few versions back. You could always use the trial version from Windows as well. So there's a lot of options right there. And Veeam gives you a community edition that protects up to 10 instances. But if you want something that's already set up, easy to use, all of the instructions built in, well, then if you go to the logical operations website, the address is veeam.lochoice.com. Then you see there's a button here. You have to log in. How do you get an account? Well, the account was made for you when you already attended the official training. So if you didn't attend the training, unfortunately, it's not possible to get to this website. But inside, there's actually quite a few things I want to call out. For example, notice here in the presentation when you did the training, there was a lot of animated slides. There's also a section here called quick recap videos. These are videos where we did a recording with an instructor, and he walks you through all of those animated slides that in the book obviously are very static. Similar, there's a whole exam preparation video section here. Most of those are with yours truly, and we go through the whole exam guide document. It's not a replacement for training. It's just to try and make sure that you understand what's expected from you, more tips and tricks. So don't miss out on those videos. But what I really wanted to point out here is this green arrow right over here. And I'll make a second arrow just to have a lot of arrows, which is you can actually go and purchase additional lab time. The cost can vary a little bit region to region, but typically it's in the vicinity of 195 euros. And then you get 13 days of unlimited lab launches. And they don't work in sort of a sequence. You can do them in sequence, of course, but you can jump back and forth to any lab that you want to do, which means you don't have to do 10 labs just to do lab number 11, for example. What if you're on a bit of a tighter budget here? Well, then we also have this website. It's run community driven by one of Veeam employees, actually, Stein, and he has this Veeam Click website. And inside, you can click through many different operations. So it's kind of like a lab, but more such as a simulator, you could say. But it's incredibly helpful, especially for some of those features where you don't really want to have to wait for everything to happen, right? Because it's a simulator, you can very quickly progress through everything. Now let's continue a little bit here with the exam guide. So again, here we have some sample in the user guide and from the exam guide document. So let's try perhaps and see if we can do a little quiz here. So here I've put a bit of a question on the whole setup, and let's see if we can get Slido here to work. First of all, I'll switch over to Slido. And this is completely free. So if you scan the QR code, and I'll try and move out of the way here, you can also go to the website and just type in this code. And that will allow you to join. So we can go through a couple of question examples here together. Click start activation here. See if we can get a couple of people to hopefully join in. So just to kind of recap the question we are looking at a failback. So we've got a replica, we've already done a failover, and what happens if we do a failback to the existing original VM. Some different operations are going to be performed. Original VM is running, it's going to be powered off by backup and replication. Working failback snapshot is going to be created. But what is then going to happen is the question. Let's see. We have some suggestions here. Maybe everyone's just very shy. Okay, well, that's fine. So what we'll do is I'll come back here, and there's a couple of things that happens, right? So we powered off the VM, we create this working failback snapshot. Then we go and create a protective snapshot on the replica. And that's because we are able to, in fact, do a undo failback. So this would allow us to go back to the state that the replica was in before I did the failback. Now, nothing really should be changing, but it's just to make sure that you know exactly which state it's in. Now we have these snapshots, and one of the reasons why we have this extra snapshot on the original production VM is that we can then start calculating the difference. So we know exactly which blocks have changed. This helps us then transfer all of those blocks over. And then, of course, we start the transfer, powering off, and then we can finally do the failback. There's quite a few moving parts here. And it's just, again, one of those examples of, oh yeah, failback super easy to do, but do we really actually remember what happens? There are quite a few steps. Let's do a little bit of an example here. In this example, we have a customer. They notice that there are network issues They have a standalone ESXi host. They do a failover of VMs to a second standalone host that they have, where this replication job is sending replica copies over. And everything seems to be good, but then unfortunately after some time, they start to have some problems. They get machine name conflicts. What could the problem be? What could be the problem here? So one of the issues, of course, that we might want to think about. Well, maybe let's go and see. Maybe we have some suggestions here in the audience. That would be nice at least. Let's see. We'll give you folks a chance to see if you have some suggestions. But don't be shy. It's always good to have some engagement here. So some of the suggestions here could be maybe it's some sort of known problem in Windows. We would have to go and patch before we could get this problem solved. Maybe it's when we do some failover here, we have to go and trigger sysprep to make sure that we don't have any name conflicts. Oh, and we have Sasso joined. Awesome. Thank you for taking the time to join. Let's see if you have some suggestion here. I'll give you a chance to read through the answer options here. We remember we were having some network issues on that original host. Maybe we're having problems on the target host as well. Maybe it could be that when we do a failover, we also have to do a permanent failover to avoid having any machine name conflicts. On this example, it could be the fact that it's because we had a VM, it was on a host. Remember that host has a VM which is in fact powered on. When you do the failover, what happens to that original VM? Veeam will not actually go and power it off. It's going to remain powered on. Which means now you suddenly have two VMs that are powered on with the same name, the same IP, unless of course you have re-IPing enabled. Now, initially we don't have any problems because that original source host is offline on the network, but the VM is technically still running. So when the networking team finally resolves those networking issues, suddenly we have the same VM powered on two places. They have the same IP, they have the same name. This is definitely going to cause some conflicts, right? So in this example here, the correct answer would be that it's because the network issues on the original host have been resolved. Okay, hopefully that helps a little bit, just to try and put a correct frame of mind here when we're doing these types of questions. Make sure we use both the information that's provided, but also the contextual knowledge of how do these features work. What's done, what's not done. Sometimes that helps us a lot as well. Let's take a closer look at some of these exam questions as well. One of the issues I've seen, and also heard from many people over time, is that they often rush through the questions, and this rushing can lead to some unnecessary errors. So how can you avoid being in a time crunch? Well, one of the suggestions I always give is if you hit a question and you think, okay, I literally have no idea what to do with this question. Oftentimes people will then dig their heels in and try and spend more and more and more time. Don't do that. Just mark the question for review. Don't pick any answers. Go to the next question immediately. This way you want to have a positive forward momentum, and then you can come back to them at the end. This way you don't run out of time where you could have been answering questions that you easily could answer, as opposed to spending all of the time on questions that you apparently didn't know what the answer was to. Now, when you do focus on the questions that you think you can answer, then of course, make sure that you take the time to truly understand what each question is actually asking you. Right? Too many times I've seen people skim over the question, in many cases even completely skip the question. Then they go down to the answer options, read those first, and they skim through the question. And then they pick the answer that they want. Make sure that you really understand the question. Otherwise, you risk answering a different question than what actually is being asked. And that makes it much more difficult to come up with the correct answer. All right, Meow. Not sure if anyone ever experienced what I like to call déjà vu. So try to, maybe before you go down to the answer options, like I said, read carefully through the question, but then pause for a moment before you go down to the answer options. Try to visualize in your mind what you believe to be the correct answer. Then you can go down and start reviewing these answer options. Now, the answer options, there will obviously be one or more correct answers that should always be listed out, but the wrong or incorrect answers are what we officially technically call distractors. There shouldn't be any trick questions. I spend a lot of time myself reviewing exam questions to avoid any type of trick questions. But that doesn't mean that the answer might still appeal to you. And so as you're trying to look through these, try to first see if you can find the answer that matches up with what you thought it was going to be. If you find it, great, that's the one you probably want to go with. Maybe just then do a quick scan and see if there is an answer that you think looks even better. But you want to find the one that's closest to the one you already decided. Just kind of double check the other ones and then go forward. Don't do this second guessing, like go with your initial gut feeling and then move forward. Too often I've seen people, when we do some testing, where they start questioning themselves and then they move away from what actually they had already picked that was the correct answer to something else, which was unfortunately not the correct answer. And this is a big shame, of course. This is not what we want to see. Okay, let's go and take a look at the next quiz here. So this is not really exactly a Veeam related question, but it's more to try and give you a feeling for this. Now, if you've never watched Harry Potter or read anything, that's fair enough. I just wanted to try and produce some situation where I think most people at least have some idea. Let's see here if we can get a couple of people to pick something. Okay, thank you for that. See someone already answering. That's wonderful. But the interesting thing about these answer options, of course, we have a few here, right? Vernon sits him down, tells him, "You're a wizard," or he accidentally does magic, or he receives this information about Hogwarts via Owl Post, or Hagrid tells him, "You're a wizard, Harry." All of these can be pretty tempting. I see we even have a bit of a duck down, bit of a 50-50 split here. Now, the interesting thing here, of course, is that technically he does accidentally do magic, but he doesn't know that he's a wizard, right? So this is a good example of a distractor, right? he doesn't know that he's a wizard. He's just actually a little bit confused. He does get these owl posts, but they are also intercepted, so he doesn't still actually know. And then finally, Hagrid does, in fact, tell him, Harry, you're wizards. And that's when he finally knows. Right? So it's a little bit similar to what you sometimes might experience on the exam. You see something that you remember. The problem is maybe you're remembering some information about how it works on Hyper-V, but the question is specifically asking you about vSphere or vice versa. So be careful sometimes. Make sure that you, again, take the time to really understand. The issue here is, as we're sort of running through these multiple choice questions, our brain can easily zoom in or zero in on a answer choice, just like with the Harry Potter thing here. Something that did happen, or something that you saw. You can't sort of sit and cross out any answers that you're not that you know are wrong, but try to do it mentally, because what we're looking to do is to narrow down the list of possible choices to fewer and fewer. So even if you only can eliminate one or two answers, you're still increasing your percentage chances by quite a lot. Normally, there should be, for one correct answer, there should be, meaning if you have to select just one answer, there should be 4 answer options. So if you can eliminate 2 of them, well, then you're already down to 50-50 chance, even if you're guessing. Those are realistic odds, yeah? Now, as for the exam, there are lots of study tools out there. First of all, I do want to point out on this logical operations website that I was talking about before, we have these exam preparation video pages. And let me just briefly go and show you this website here just to make sure you've seen it at least once before. So this is the site veeam.lochoice.com. I'm just going to log in. You'll want to find this Veeam Availability Suite V11 box. Here we have that lab time that I was talking about. Down here we have this exam preparation videos section. Notice there are 11 videos, but it's not so obvious. There are 2 pages that you can switch. I wish the UI was a little bit different here, but unfortunately it's not. But start from here at the top with the introduction, and I'll take you through all of the different sections, trying to give you some good hints on what to be extra careful with as you're preparing. And then finally, the areas that I see a lot of people seem to be missing. And then finally, some extra tips and tricks for the exam. As I said, you have to have already attended the training to be able to access that website. So if you're thinking, how do I get access? Well, you have to do the training. And the way it works is during the training, you get an access key. You then use that key. It's a one-time key that you use to create a personal account. So if you're already saying, well, I did the training already, what's my key? Hopefully you use the key during the training to go and download all of the books. If you forgot your username and password, you can always contact Logical Operations customer service and they can help you out. If you're completely desperate, just contact Veeam on the email address vmce@veeam.com and someone will obviously be able to help you out. The next step would be to start using practice exams. And these are a wonderful tool, but there's a couple of things that I have to say about that. One is use practice exams. Don't use brain dumps. Right? Number one, I've looked at, as a part of my job, many brain dumps over the years. And the problem is always, number one, where did these questions really come from? Do we really want to pass an exam by cheating? Meaning someone literally stole the real exam questions. Problem is, number one, oftentimes someone will post something maybe super old, or they copied someone else's practice questions and they are selling this as if it's the real exam. Sometimes it might be actually the real exam questions, maybe even with the real answer options. And then the answers that they've marked as the correct answer, very, very often, they are not the correct. And I'm not saying that because I'm trying to scare someone away here. It's just a fact. The problem then is if you're trying to memorize or learn something by looking at what you think is the correct answer, and it's not, then you're pushing out good information and instead pushing in bad information, which means if you apply this during the real exam, you'll probably fail. And that doesn't help anyone. So try and think, why is it that I want to pass the exam? Is it just to get a checkbox somewhere? Then maybe this is going to be helpful. If it's because you want it to be a career potentially changing move, you want recognition that you actually know these things, then maybe it's better to actually invest a little bit of time and learn these things. It will also probably help you in your daily job. And this is where using real practice exams come into play. Because what is the purpose here? It's to try and test you. Where are you on this journey? You'll see that the practice questions I write and put on my personal website, rasmushasland.com, the questions, they are usually a little bit long. They're typically longer than the ones you see on the real exam. And they're typically more difficult than the ones you see on the real exam. It's because I'm trying to push you back into the user guide, to read, to push you back into the lab, to go and try something out to see what the answer is. So that while you may be finding the answers to that one question, you hopefully, at least that's what I would like to see, you're gaining knowledge that could be applied to not just specifically that one question, but to other questions as well. And this is where I just want to remind you, it's so important that we are learning here, that we are achieving understanding. If you're just memorizing, so that when you go to a practice exam, you can say, okay, this one, you don't even need to read it. You already know it's going to be A, C, B, D, A, D, B. Okay, great. Now you can get a nice 100% on the practice exam, but those are not the questions that are going to be on the real exam. So don't do that. Instead, brute force it if you want to, right? But make sure that you can actually explain, why is this one correct? And even more difficult sometimes is, why are these other ones not correct? But this is what helps you as you push forward on the real exam. Before you sit the real exam, it's probably a good idea to try and aim that you can consistently do about 90% better on the practice exams. Because if you can't, it means, what if those questions testing you on something different? You suddenly can't look up anything. You only have the computer to answer questions and what's in your brain. So set yourself up for success, get the exam scheduled, and then use the practice exams, of course. And the last step here, of course, is to go and do the exam. And I have a bit of a personal preference here on where to do the exams. Now this can change, of course, a little bit, and it's potentially even a bit of a personal preference. But there are two options, of course. One is online proctoring, and the other one is to go in person. I've often heard from people who told me, I can't do the exam before such and such date because there are no available time slots. When I then go online and check, I can easily find a time slot, even in their time location. And often it's because they are trying to only do online proctoring. Personally, I have a massive preference for doing in-person tests. When you do online proctoring, there's a lot of stress factors. What about the internet? It has to work. If it suddenly fails, that's on you. I don't need that kind of pressure. If you're at home and you have kids or spouse or animals of some sort, pets, and suddenly the door opens up to a room, you'll fail the exam immediately. The proctor's going to fail you. If I'm in a test center, there's also going to be a proctor, but it's their responsibility to make sure that all of my surroundings are in a good state, that there's no noise. If the computer fails, the internet fails, well, it actually doesn't matter if the internet fails because everything's running offline in an in-person test center. But if the computer fails, they can give you more time. They can even reschedule the exam for free. If you are one of those people who, when you're doing the exam, talk to yourself, and you do this during the online proctoring, you'll get a warning. And if you do it again, they will fail you. They'll even consider potentially that you're cheating. Now, I talk a lot to myself. I'm doing that right now, but hopefully you're listening. But on the exam, I also, if I have the opportunity, I'm in the room, I'll talk out loud to myself. Sometimes there are other people in the room. That's why the test center I like to use only has one seat. That way I'm in a room by myself and it doesn't really matter. It just helps me sort of logically work my way through some of the questions. If you are working in IT, which probably you're doing if you're watching this video, you've maybe experienced at some point in your career a challenge of some sort that you were having issues solving. And then you call a friend to get advice. But I've experienced many a times, and it's very odd. I'm explaining the problem to this person, and before they can even say anything, I realize what the solution is. Just by talking my way through it. And that's what I also see on the exam here. There's actually a bit of a mistake here. Number two, I just realized that this has changed. Actually, it used to be that you would get something to write on, but that's actually not the case anymore. There's a digital scratch paper, and that's available in both exams. But in person, you no longer get a physical piece of scratch paper. So just a little correction there. What about the online proctoring? Is it all bad? Of course not. You get more flexibility, right? You don't have to travel anywhere. Hopefully, you can control the surroundings, meaning you can make sure you're the only one there. You can't have any VPNs installed. If you have certain security softwares, it can interfere. Technically, they have a system check software. However, I've seen sometimes where the system check says, yes, everything is good, but then on exactly the same computer when the exam starts, suddenly it doesn't start. I think it's been fixed, but I know, for example, if you had Carbon Black, the security software from VMware, that was known to cause issues for quite some time, but I'm sure that they will help you get all of that stuff done. As I mentioned, don't talk at all during the exam. That includes the survey. So wait until you're completely done, browser window is closed, I don't know, reboot the computer, whatever, so you're confident everything is done, and then you should be in a good state. I even go as far as suggesting that you only use a personal laptop, just so that you don't get hit by some corporate policy that's suddenly preventing some check by Pearson VUE. When you do run the system check, this is what it looks like on Windows at least. Here I intentionally just left some stuff running. You can see I have Teams and Skype and Slack and all of that stuff running. And if you click OK, it's going to try and close all of these processes. And this is where sometimes the antivirus ends up on this list. And obviously it won't be allowed to close that. And then you end up in this kind of deadlock situation. Obviously, you also want to make sure that your microphone works because you need to be able to interact with the proctor. You want to make sure your internet speed is stable. If at all possible, I would connect it by cable, just so you don't get hit by some crazy Wi-Fi issues. And then you need to have a camera that can kind of move around and show the room to the proctor. So I put a QR code here that takes you to the system check, just in case you want to give it a try as well. And we do have some time left here, and hopefully you didn't completely give up on me here, and you're willing to do a few questions here. So I'd love to hear from you if there are some questions. And I think, unfortunately, there's not really a chat option here, but let's see if we can put a little question in Slido. Put it over to Slido, and this should allow you to type in live questions. Hopefully we have some. One of the common questions I had recently was if I was going to record new question review questions, because I in the past did videos for each of the practice exam questions for the 2020 exam. If I was going to do the same for the 2021, probably yes. I've just struggling a little bit to find the right amount of time to get it done. Let's see, someone's typing out a question. Very exciting. Let's see what good questions we'll get. Okay, maybe it's a long question. Oh, there we are. Let's see, here's an option to get access key for veeam.lochoice.com from my Veeam partner account page. Should I write to support? So the education center that you attended the training with are the ones who will buy your courseware from Logic Corporations. And when they do that, they get the key. So if you remember who you took the training with, and there's a lot of education centers, it could be Arrow, Ingram, Tech Data, GTI, DLS, InfoSight. There's so many. Then you would essentially write to them, and it could be sometimes Veeam runs some strategic classes, for example, at Veeam On. So if you attended it where it was run directly by Veeam, then of course just contact Veeam at vmce.com. If you don't remember where you took the training, then drop us an email as well. We can help you locate the training that you attended, if it was reported at least. We don't have the key because we're not the ones providing it to you unless we ran the training. But just drop us a note if you need help trying to get it. Of course, we can help with that. But otherwise, just contact the education center. The question then, of course, is if you don't have the key, it also means that all of this extra content that we have there, like the exam prep videos and books and so on, you don't have access to that. And that's going to make it much more difficult, of course, to successfully prepare for the exam. My pleasure. Hope you find it. Otherwise, just please reach out so we can give you a hand here. Okay, any other questions at all that I can help with? Otherwise, if not, you're always welcome to reach out to me on the YouTube channel here, or on LinkedIn, or on Twitter. On Twitter, you can find me using the @Haslund username. Thank you so much for taking the time to join this stream today. Really appreciate you being here, and best of luck on your VMC certification journey.